Okay, so the iPad lineup has changed pretty significantly since last year, and while it's easier now in a way because there's less iPads to choose from, there's actually more iPad accessories, more software specific stuff, and a lot of them do lots of different things. So in this video, I'm going to run through every single one of them and give you some of my best advice on which one I think you should get depending on what sort of person you are. So let's get into it. Before we get started though, there are a bunch of things which I think are really important to know if you're considering a new iPad. And first up is all the stuff that's same across the board. So every new iPad sold by Apple has USB-C. They've all got front and back cameras, and on the front it's got center stage, and they're all in landscape now, which is really good, apart from the iPad mini. They all support universal control and sidecar if you want to use them with your Mac. And most importantly, they're all really quick still. Even the entry-level model iPad is really good for day-to-day use and for the switching between apps and things like that. You're not going to notice a massive difference between these. Secondly, the accessories are now more complicated than they've ever been. So some keyboards work with some iPads, some pencils work with other iPads, and it's all a bit of a mess, but I'm going to go into those, so don't worry. Thirdly, not all the iPads have the same software features anymore. There's a few apps like Final Cut which don't run on the entry-level iPads, and you can't do things like external monitor support on the lower end models either. Fourthly is you need to just be aware of Apple's pricing ladder, because as soon as you add a bit more storage or something like that to an iPad, you're going to cross over with the next one, and it's really easy for costs to kind of spiral out of control. And lastly, you should absolutely consider a laptop or a MacBook if you're looking at spending this much money, because they're going to cross over again in terms of pricing, and a laptop or a MacBook might actually serve you a little bit better, so keep that in mind as well. And of course, the same as last year, I'm going to throw up my iPad graph so you can see exactly where I think each one ranks. So let's just go for it. The first iPad that Apple offers is the entry-level 10th gen, and this also means that the 9th gen has now gone, so that older design is not around anymore. And I went on record a couple of years ago when this came out to say that I love this iPad, and I still really do. And the best thing about it now is it now starts at £100 lower, so it's £350 for an entry-level model, which is really, really good. And this is a really decent iPad. You're getting that wonderful newer design, a bunch of colours to choose from, USB-C of course, a nice webcam on the front and the back and in the right place. There is an air gap with the screen, so you can see a little bit of a gap between the screen and where you actually touch the glass on the front, but this isn't too noticeable unless you've got another iPad next to it. And performance across the board on it is really good too. This is going to keep up with pretty much everything you could ask from an iPad really well. And it's surprisingly great for gaming too. Even though this has got the slightly older A14 chip in there, it still performs really, really well. And because this is one of the entry-level iPads though, there are some compromises with it, and mostly is you're not getting external monitor support on this one. So you can still connect it to a display, but it will just mirror it. You won't get the Stage Manager kind of desktop scenario with it, which is a bit of a shame. And you're also not going to get access to things like Apple Intelligence, which are coming out later this year and next year. And there are a few apps which it just doesn't support. Final Cut by Apple is probably the biggest example of this, but there are some other apps which have features locked because it's not an M series chip. That's not actually a huge deal because it's such a small kind of niche of apps that do that, but it is worth keeping in mind. When it comes to accessories, the 10th gen is a bit strange because it supports the Apple Pencil first generation and the Apple Pencil with USB-C, and it has its own specific keyboard. What I will say about the pencils is I'd avoid getting the first gen and go straight to the USB-C one, because that supports all of these iPads, and if you ever upgrade then you can keep your pencil, and that first gen only supports this iPad. The keyboard that Apple sells for this is awesome as well. It's actually a really decent keyboard, but it is £250, which is almost as much as the iPad, which is quite a big price to swallow. I think if I was in this area, I would look for a third-party keyboard because you can just get them so much cheaper. I must admit though, I can only recommend this at a base level at the 64GB of storage, because once you add more storage to it, it's £150 extra, which brings you so unbelievably close to the iPad Air, which is unbelievably better and has a bit more storage to go along with it. Now I know I said to be aware of the pricing ladder, but I think this is potentially the only time where it makes sense. And so plotting this on the graph is kind of easy to recommend to pretty much anyone that just wants kind of a more basic iPad experience that will stay relevant for a long time. And it's also great for students as well. Before we move on though, I did want to thank the sponsor of this video, Paperlike. If you weren't already sure through my videos, Paperlike is a screen protector for your iPad that really makes it feel like you're drawing, writing or sketching on paper. It not only protects your screen, but it also gets rid of that kind of unnatural feeling of writing or drawing on glass. If you are someone who uses the Apple Pencil a lot like I do, then you will feel the difference immediately. Paperlike uses something called nanodot technology, which adds resistance and grip to the tip of your pencil, emulating that wonderful pencil on paper experience. It also reduces screen glare in bright conditions, and it's kind of like a similar effect to Apple's nanodot display on the new iPad Pros, but this is still the only way to get that resistance and grip on the pencil, so you can use it on there too. So if you're looking for a new screen protector for your current iPad or for your shiny new one that's on the way, then be sure to check Paperlike out. I'll link it all in the description below. Okay, moving on now to the most beloved iPad out there by many, and that's the iPad mini. Despite its age, the iPad mini is still a really decent iPad. You get a bunch of nice colours with it. You're getting that laminated screen, which means there's no air gap between the pixels and your finger, which is always really nice. It gets USB-C, webcams on the front and back, and it's basically a fully fledged iPad just shrunk down. And to be honest, this is the only choice you have if you want a small iPad, which means the use of it is pretty specific. You're probably going to know if you want this small one or if you don't. When it comes to performance, this thing is really great across the board. It's got the A15 chip, and last year I said I think this is the best iPad for gaming, and I still stand by that now. The size of this iPad for on-screen kind of touch controls feels just perfect, and it's still got plenty of power to play the latest games, which is nice. Once again though, you're not getting access to those higher end features, so there's no external monitor support with Stage Manager, and you're not getting access to kind of the higher level apps like Final Cut or the more specific controls in DaVinci Resolve, which is worth keeping in mind. And interestingly, it's now the only new iPad sold by Apple which supports the Apple Pencil too, and there's no official keyboard for it, which probably makes sense. This is a tiny iPad, and you can get some out there if you look on Amazon or something like that, but from Apple you're just getting the folio cases. I do think it's kind of expensive where it sits in the lineup at the moment. This iPad is basically £500 no matter which way you look at it, and if you want to add storage or anything, it goes up from there, and I don't think it's kind of meaningfully better in any way than the entry-level iPad. It's also the oldest iPad Apple sell at the moment, and in my mind that means that a replacement is likely imminent, whether that's later this year or early next year. We don't really know, and I don't want to overly speculate on that, but that's something I would err on the side of caution for. Overall, it's the only mini iPad you can get, and that actually makes putting it onto my graph kind of tricky because I think a lot of professional creators can use it, like artists like having it for a small sketchbook. A lot of doctors use it for patients and things like that, and you know, it's also perfect for students with the size you can just slip into a bag. So for me, this one kind of goes slap bang in the middle. It's pretty much the only choice if you want that smaller iPad, so it's just going to have to sit there. Okay, let's move on to the iPad Air, because this really is a huge level up over the iPads we've talked about before, and I actually think this is where most people should put their money. It gives you 95% of the experience of the iPad Pro, all at a lower cost, which is fantastic, and it now comes in the 11-inch and a 13-inch size, so you don't need a Pro iPad if you want that bigger screen. It's now here on the iPad Air. The iPad Air starts at a wonderful 128GB of storage, which is so nice to see them dump 64GB. The new colour selections are really nice, they're all pastel-y, and for me they're perfect. You're getting the wonderful laminated screen, and the big update here is you're getting the M2 chip, which is a crazy powerful chip. It was in the iPad Pro from a couple of years ago, and it's still the same chip they're using in things like Vision Pro and some of the MacBooks, and it's fantastic. It also opens up the bigger features. You're getting the external monitor support with Stage Manager, so you can have a full desktop experience with your iPad if you want, and there's no app limitations at all. You can go on the App Store and download whatever you want, including the big ones from Apple like Final Cut, and getting the full DaVinci Resolve and things like that. It's also going to give you access to Apple Intelligence, which is coming later down the year, which might even transform the way we kind of use our products, which is just a good thing to have in the bag. Also, if it's important for you, you're going to get much better gaming performance out of this than you did in the other two. When it comes to accessories, you are getting access to the brand new Apple Pencil Pro, which are my favorite bits of tech of the year. It's such a wonderful update. You get squeeze controls, so you can squeeze the pen, get access to more options. You're getting things like barrel roll, which is really useful if you're an artist. You're getting Find My, so if you lose it, you can find it. And you're also getting Apple Pencil Hover as well, which shows where the pencil is going to be before you touch the screen, which is all really, really great updates to have. With the Air as well, you're also getting access to the Apple Magic kind of floating keyboard, which is definitely one of the best keyboards out there. And it gives the iPad more of this kind of laptop replacement kind of look, if that's what you're after. So overall, it's a really well-rounded iPad. I think it gives you access to pretty much absolutely everything you could need. And the price is decent at the starting point as well. The 11-inch iPad Air starts at £599 and the 13-inch is £799, which is obviously still a lot of money, but I think you're getting a lot of iPad here. Once again, if you add storage or if you add a pencil and a keyboard, then you're going to jump over £1,000 no matter how you look at it. So at this point, you should really absolutely consider a laptop or a MacBook as well. I really, really like the iPad Air, and I'd say it's the only iPad which kind of covers this overall spectrum of people that are looking for it. It's great for students, it's great for people that just want to consume content and have an iPad around, and it's also powerful enough for creators and professionals too. So on my graph, this one's covering the whole lot. It's really great. Alright, let's talk about the Pro iPads, and these are the all singing, all dancing, all brand new for this year iPads, which includes a brand new design, a new screen, new Apple Pencil, new keyboard, kind of new everything. So let's dig into it. The headline feature is the new design. This is really slim and really light, and when you compare it to the other iPads, you can really tell. And the 13-inch model is Apple's slimmest device they've ever made, which is absolutely ludicrous. The new screen is a tandem OLED one, which basically just means it's a really nice OLED screen, and it looks absolutely fantastic, and it gets really bright. You're also getting an option for nano texture on that screen as well, which I think most people should avoid unless you're working outside or in highly reflective situations, because it's a lot more expensive and I don't think it does much for most people. And of course, it is still the only iPad model with 120Hz refresh rate, giving it that lovely Pro Motion feel. So everything you do on here feels fast and fluid and natural. It's also the only iPad with Face ID as well, which I don't think is a deal breaker, but it is still a nice feature to have. But of course, the big new thing here is the Apple M4 chip. It's the only product in all of Apple's lineup which currently has the M4 chip at the time of making this video, and it just means this thing basically flies through anything you throw at it. Day-to-day difference, again, is hard to tell, but as soon as you move into something like gaming or video editing or anything which is kind of taxing, this iPad just crushes it. And with that M4 chip as well, you're obviously getting access to absolutely everything an iPad has to offer. External monitor support is all here, Stage Manager support is here, all of the apps and everything you would like to do on an iPad can be done with no limitations. It really is a crazy chip to think that this is stuffed into an iPad. Mercifully as well, Apple have upped the storage on this one, so the iPad Pros now start with 256GB of storage, and you can push that all the way to 2TB of storage coupled with 16GB of RAM if you really think you need it, which is just wild. When it comes to accessories, you're getting access to the new Apple Pencil Pro, which is awesome, which has got all the features which I talked about before. Unfortunately though, it no longer supports the Apple Pencil from previous generations. The only ones it supports now is the Apple Pencil USB-C and the Apple Pencil Pro. And you're also getting access to the brand new Magic Keyboard. This is easily the best keyboard that Apple makes, and it only works with the new Pros. You're getting the full function row, a nice kind of slim metal design, and the trackpad this time round is much bigger, which is a really nice quality of life update. Just makes using iPadOS much nicer. These iPads come in 11-inch and 13 inches, and the prices start at £999, which is basically £1,000. And honestly, if you're looking in this area, you need to consider a MacBook or a laptop 100%, because as soon as you up any of the storage, or if you add a keyboard or a pencil or anything like that, you start shifting up the money really quickly, and you can get a very capable computer for that. For example, you can push them all the way to £3,077 if you max it out, which is a ludicrous amount to spend on an iPad, and you could probably buy an iPad Air and an iPhone and a MacBook for that much money, which is just crazy to think about. So look, this is an incredible piece of hardware. I actually think it's the best piece of hardware that Apple make at the moment. There's no doubt about it. But I think it caters to a really kind of small section of people that are using iPads. This is absolutely for people with very specific uses. So if you're kind of a creator or a professional, it jumps into my graph right at the end there, because it really is just very expensive. Unless you're someone that just wants the biggest and best thing, then no worries, go for it. But I think most people will be better off going for an iPad Air. Okay, so that finishes my iPad scale, and I'll put this in a link below if you want to check it out or just see an image of it for a while. But I'm pretty happy with this. I think most of the iPads have a more clear position now of who they're aimed at and what they're for. Of course, this is just my opinion. There's no reason why a student couldn't get an iPad Pro, or just someone that wants to watch things on the best screen ever to go and get an iPad Pro, and there's no reason a creator or a professional couldn't use an entry-level iPad. There's obviously no problem with that at all. Okay, so those are all of the new iPads, but it wouldn't be fair to not mention the pre-owned section, because the iPads have been so good for a long time now that getting something that's like a year old or a couple years old is a perfectly good way to go as well. Just remember that prices can be really variable on this. It really depends on where you're looking, if that's Amazon or Apple's refurbished site or just eBay or anything like that. But after a quick Google, I found you can pick up an iPad mini for around the £300 mark. You can pick up the M1 iPad Air from a couple years ago, which is a really good iPad, which I'd still recommend, from like £300 to kind of this £500 area. And you can still pick up the M1 and M2 iPad Pros from anywhere from like £450 up to like £800 or £1,000. And those iPads are still like crazy capable. And in some ways, the M2 iPad Pro is better than the current M2 iPad Air. So absolutely dig around, do a bit of research, see what you can find, because there are deals to be had out there and you don't need to go for something brand new specifically. Before we finish this video, I think it's only fair to tell you exactly what iPad I would go for if I was looking at getting a new iPad, as in the market for a brand new one. And look, I'm a creator, so I'm pretty biased on these sorts of things, but if I was watching YouTube and I was just looking at an iPad to get and I wasn't making content, then I would 100% pick up the 11-inch iPad Air with M2. I would keep it at the base storage, and I'd probably go for either the blue or the purple one. If I was looking at getting a pre-owned one though, which is very, very tempting, I'd either grab the M1 Pro or the M2 Pro, depending on what I could find. And again, I'd go for the 11-inch most likely. However, I am a creator, I make content for YouTube and things like this all the time, and I am a massive iPad fan. So I have actually just upgraded. I was using the M1 iPad Pro 12.9-inch, and I've just shot over to the M4 iPad Pro in 11-inch. So I've actually downsized, and I will explain why in a video soon. If it's already out, I'll link it below, but if not, it will be coming soon. Anyway, that wraps up this video. That wraps up my entire buyer's guide for the iPad series. I hope it was helpful in some way. If it was, leave a comment below, or if you've got any other advice you'd like to give to other people, chuck them in the comments below as well, because I always love to see what you have to say. And as ever, I will see you all in the next one.